Greetings, I am Herbert Erpaderp, and today I'm going to be building one of these Plastic Soldier Company German SdKfz 231s or 8 rads. I've been meaning to build this box for quite a while now. These are of course 15mm or 1/100th scale plastic models. This kit can build a few variants of this vehicle and they're all pictured on the front of the box here, those being the SdKfz 231, 232, 233 and 263. The back of the box shows us a couple of images of the 231 in a grey and desert yellow scheme, and there's also a list of suggested paints to paint those schemes. Pretty simple, but I guess nobody really buys a model for the back of the box, do they? Let's look at the important stuff which can be found on the inside of the box. There are 5 of these sprues in the box, so 5 vehicles can be built, as the box promises. I feel like I've said the word box about 100 times already. Box, boxity box, box, box. As you can hopefully see, there are 3 hull tops to allow for the different variations of this vehicle to be easily built. There are also a bunch of other parts specific to different variants, meaning there will be a few leftovers, which is fine by me. The parts on these sprues are very nice and neatly moulded. I wasn't able to find any obvious defects or anything like that. The mould lines are almost non-existent. They are of course there, they always are, and you will have to remove them, but that's not going to be very difficult at all. The worst spot for the mould lines is probably the wheels. This kit includes a crew, though these are really only to be used on the SdKfz 233 version with the 75mm gun, that being an open-topped vehicle. These figures are quite good in my opinion. Possibly the best crew that I've seen on a Plastic Soldier Company kit. A lot of the details, like the antennas, are quite nice too, not quite so fine that they would snap if you just looked at them, but they're also not very chunky like gaming kits tend to be. All of these parts look pretty decent and nicely detailed without being overly complicated. It doesn't look like this is going to be a very tricky kit to build. Of course, Plastic Soldier Company kits don't tend to include decals, so none are included here. You'll have to source them elsewhere when you paint this model. The instruction sheet is of course included. It would be bizarre if it weren't. One side has a sprue diagram that lets you know which parts are for which variants of the 8rad, and the other side shows the actual assembly instructions. These are pretty decent and easy enough to follow, at least for the 231 and 232. It does seem to kind of ignore the 263 and isn't very comprehensive on the 233. I'm sure you can figure out how those go together though once the base assembly is done. Speaking of assembly, let's do that. The first step is wheels. All 8 of them. I clean them all up and then they can be attached to the framey, wheelie holdy bits, which is simple enough really. The wheels do have a slightly tight fit to them, so you'll need to apply a bit of pressure to get them on. I suggest being careful when applying pressure so you don't break the axles. That would be annoying, though I doubt it would be easy to actually do. Once you have the 2 wheelie assemblies built like so, they can be glued onto the lower hull. This is quite easy, which is not entirely unexpected. They should slot into the large rectangular slot. I think it's probably kind of obvious which way they should go up. I then add the upper hull, after test fitting of course. This isn't really keyed as such, but it will almost lock into place. It won't actually lock, but you can feel when it's where it should be. The fit isn't absolutely perfect, even after I applied gap nullifying pressure, but it's pretty decent. Probably worth filling in those tiny gaps along the sharp edge later on though. Now to fill in the huge gaps at either end of the hull. You probably won't be surprised to learn that there are end parts for these. Before installing them we have to add the headlamps to those end parts though. The front part has a pickaxe and shovel moulded into it, and the headlamps should be the larger of the 2 pairs. The headlamp part slots into the back of the whole front part. It takes a bit of pressure, but it's not too difficult. I add glue so that it stays together, and then I glue that assembly into the front of the hull. Again, I apply more pressure, and the fit is pretty decent. Unfortunately, the top part of this is a bit messy. There was a bit of a dip in the plastic to either side of the sprue gate, resulting in an ugly blemish. This will need to be filled in later on. Other than that, it doesn't look too bad. Filling in the hole on the whole rear is much the same as the front, just the parts are a bit different. I press the lamp part into the end part, add glue and pressure, then attach that assembly to the rear of the hull. The fit here is actually nicer than on the front of the model. Looks fairly decent so far. I then add the side mudguard skirty things. Yes, that is the technical term. There's a kind of almost keying for these, but it is kind of tricky to get them sitting properly, and once I found that correct position, I had to hold them until the glue bonded. I think I got them on pretty much as straight as I could. I think on the next 4 of these that I build, I'll add the side skirts before adding the wheels to the lower hull. I think it might be easier to position them that way. Moving on, I added the exhausts. These attach to the rear of the mudguard parts like so, and they are easy enough to install, though do make sure you're putting the correct part on the correct side. I'm sure you'd probably know if you were doing it wrong. The parts wouldn't sit flat against the mudguard parts. These are very simple to attach and look very exhausty. And with that, the hull is completed. And a very interesting hull it is too, in my opinion at least. It does need a turret though. I start this by sliding the gun parts in through the tiny little mantlet part. I found I needed to apply a fair bit of pressure here to get the parts to go all the way through, so when doing this be careful that you don't break them. Nobody wants a broken gun. I add glue so that it stays in place, and then I glue that assembly to the front of the turret, which is very easy. The little notch things in the upper corners help lock it into the correct position. I then add the turret bottom, which, again, is very easy, as long as you put the part in the right way around with the pin facing downwards. I apply pressure for a bit so that it bonds nicely. And then, to finish the turret, I add the hatch. This goes into place super easy. That might have been the fastest turret build that I've ever done, and it looks pretty decent. I tried to attach it to the hull, but the pin was a bit too big for the hole. I used my knife to widen the hole just a little bit, which fixed everything. Well, not everything, but it sure did fix the issue of this turret fitting onto the hull, and that's what matters right now. So that's the Plastic Soldier Company SdKfz 231 completed. I don't have any other 8 rads in this scale to compare it with, but I do think this model is pretty good, and I believe it would stand up pretty well to 8 rads from other manufacturers. I believe Battlefront makes one in this scale in plastic, and maybe one day I'll do a comparison. I think this kit is pretty good. It was very quick and easy to build the 231 variant, and it doesn't seem like it would be much harder, if at all, to build any of the other variants too, especially the 232. It's pretty much the same as the 231, except it has the radio antenna mounted on top. The reason I've only built one variant is because that's all I actually wanted for my force. The kit is satisfying enough that I might consider getting another box and building some of the other variants, but I'm not sure when and if I actually will. This kit went together very quickly, and I'm glad that it did. I've been quite sick this week and not really had the time to complete the video that I wanted to do, so this kit has been kind of a hero. The speed and ease with which this kit can be built is pretty much the only reason there's a video this week, which is nice. It also means you could build a swarm of these in an afternoon, if for whatever reason you need a swarm of them. Not only that, but the detailing is quite good too. In my opinion, it's a pretty decent representation of an 8 rad. Being a gaming model, particularly in 15mm scale, it's never going to be a rivet counter's dream. That's clearly not its purpose though. For a gaming model, the amount of detail here is pretty good. I think this is a very interesting looking vehicle. It's kind of futuristic looking, in its own way. I'm not really sure how useful this unit is in games like Flames of War. It's probably a bit more shooty than the average recon unit, but I don't know. For me, the rule of cool applies. I would bring these in a force because I like the way they look. That's why I'm good at games. Anyway, as I said before, I think this is quite a good kit. What do you think? Have you built this kit yourself? Do you think that 8 rads are rad? Or maybe you think they're bad? Let me know in the comments section below. And if you haven't already, why not do all the liking, subscribing and following things here on YouTube, Twitch and my other social media places. And if you really like the things I do, please consider supporting over on Patreon, or by purchasing a shirt or mug from my merch store. Links to all of those things are in the description below. And, as always, I shall return soon. So until then, be excellent to each other and thanks for watching. Farewell.